Hi, I'm Beth, and today I'm sharing two methods for finishing your binding, by hand and by machine. So our first method is by hand, and this is the most traditional way of binding, and it makes your stitches invisible. So we've started by preparing our binding, and you can do this in whatever method you like, and then we've machine stitched it to the front of our quilt. Now we're going to pull it around to the back, and then we're going to hand stitch this down. So we like to use Wonder clips to hold that in place. Just helps to make sure you're getting a nice consistent fold on your binding. When you get to the corner, you want to miter your corner, so just fold it in and then place a clip there to hold that. And we've got our thread and needle prepared. We are using hand quilting thread. This is Coats & Clark, and this is nice and thick, and it's coated so it goes through really smoothly and doesn't tangle too much. The first thing you'll want to do is we like to hide the knot in the seam allowance of the quilt. So if you take a little stitch and pull it up, that way it'll be nice and tucked under your binding. So to hide your stitches, you're going to be traveling in the fold of the binding. So go in from behind and travel a little bit. And then you take a little bite of your quilt and just make sure you don't go through to the front. And then you go travel in the binding again. Take a little bite of your quilt and then travel in the binding. If you really want to make sure your stitches don't show, you can pick a matching thread. So when you get to a corner, you want to try to pop up right where the fabrics meet, because then we're going to travel down this fold and take a little bite up here and then come back down. We'll take our little bite underneath, get it kind of underneath there, and then back down. And then you can continue stitching in the same way you were doing before. When you're running out of thread and need to tie a knot, fold back the binding a little bit, take a little stitch, and then run your needle back through to make a knot. Then to bury the thread, the tail of it, you can run your needle through, and then you can cut it off here. That makes sure you don't have some flopping tail threads coming out from underneath your binding. Adding your binding by hand is a great thing to do while you're watching TV, and it's also a portable project. Our second method is doing all the binding by machine. So you'll prepare your binding in your favorite way, and then this time we're machine sewing it to the back. Then when you turn it around to the front, then we're machine stitching down to hold it down. So we've switched out for a purple thread that's going to match our binding, and then we'll do our stitching. So you want to do a stay stitch or a back stitch at the start and end of your stitching, and we're trying to get as close as possible to the edge of the binding. So just set up your machine for however that works for you. So when you get to a corner, you'll want to stop with your needle down when you're at the intersection of that miter, and then pivot and then continue on the other side. Machine stitching your binding down is a great way to finish fast. Now keep in mind you will see the stitching on the back of the quilt as well. If you want that to blend in even more, you can try a matching bobbin thread to your backing. You could even try decorative stitches or a zigzag or a serpentine stitch as well. So whether you're stitching by hand or by machine, you can get beautiful results with both.